to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Hey, Anne-Marie. We're doing something unusual today. We actually get to interview somebody who's been podcasting longer than I have.
I know. That's unusual.
I mean, it's by half a year, but I mean, it counts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be good. So Brad Miller is joining us today. He is the host of the Cancer and Comedy podcast, which is a very interesting name. I'm sure we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, Brad, welcome. Glad to have you here. How you doing?
Hey, what an incredible honor and joy to be among a couple of incredible people, Anne-Marie and Walt. Love your the model of your show, A Daily Dose of Happy. And yeah, I started podcasting in 2012, and that's when I started doing this kind of thing. And I'm not sure when you started, but around that same era.
The end of 2012, yeah.
Yeah, I started in March of 2012. So yeah, I got you by just a little bit. I did my son was the captain of his lacrosse team, and I did kind of a coaches and interview the players type of thing. So that's how I got started in it and got hooked on it and been doing it ever since.
Has it been under the current title all that time?
Oh, no. I did. I've had several podcasts over that 13 years. I'm a retired pastor, so some of them were faith-based. I still have a daily Bible study podcast, but in addition to the one we're talking about here today, Cancer and Comedy. And but I've had several years ago, when I was, my doctoral degree is about transformational leadership. So I did one kind of based on that called Beyond Adversity, where I talked to people about how they navigated through bad things that happened to them in their life, mental health wise, physical health, divorce, any number of things, the death of the family. But then a year and a half or so ago, a couple years ago, I had some life events happen. It led me to about a year and a half ago, launched the Cancer and Comedy podcast with my wonderful co-host, Deb Krier. Is her name, Kier. And she and I put this together, and we have about 80 episodes up now in about a year and a half, and love what we're doing because we like to serve people, to give them little, you call your daily dose of happy. We like to call people, give them cancer impacted people kind of a dose of hope and turn the grim into grins, is what we like to say.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Plus, we have something else in common. We have zipper tops.
Oh,
I can't remember the last time I had somebody on, and the green T-shirt underneath. I mean, like, this is amazing.
Apparently I got the memo, but Anne-Marie didn't.
I was just about to say that I didn't get the memo. No one told me. Here I am in pink.
Well, you're both looking good. I'll say that much.
Seriously, I can't remember anybody ever coming on the show with the same kind of top. It's really unusual.
Well, there you go, man. I'm here to be helpful in any way that I can.
In ways that you didn't even know you were going to be doing.
I didn't know this was a fashion show here.
Who knew?
For gray-haired guys with half zips here. So
it's like your long lost brothers. You've had long-term podcasts in the same clothes.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. So love it.
Well, you told us about when you started doing the podcasting, but let's talk specifically about the current one, the Cancer and Comedy podcast.
Sure, absolutely.
What the impetus was behind that, how that whole thing got started.
Well, the story that I have is that almost 3 years ago now, in the summer of 22, I retired from. I was a local church pastor for 43 years. And my time came to retire in July of 2022. And I always, heard these stories about these guys where, as soon as they retire, some people would drop over dead of a heart attack, and some people get divorced, and other bad things happen. So that wasn't going to happen to me. But when, a month after I retired, I went for a PSA test with my doctor, and blood test and other things, and they flagged me for prostate cancer, and then it was finally diagnosed in December of 22, kind of finally after a bunch of tests and so on. And so that kind of rocked my world and my, and kind of threw me for a loop. All the plans that I had, my wife and I are going to travel and, all that good stuff you want to do when you retire and see the grandkids and that kind of thing. You're just kind of like, okay, it's we got to have a change of plans here, and it kind of really put me in the throes. I kind of was like Cleopatra. I was the queen of denial for a while
Yeah.
because I couldn't handle it very, very well, and I was not functioning very well, and I was not very nice person. I was a little irritable about the whole situation and
Who
denial,
can blame you? Sure.
irritability, and so on. And then I said, several months of testing, and that, there was all kinds of stuff you go through,
Right.
and in that process. But the final diagnosis came down right after Christmas, 2 days after Christmas in 2022, when I finally got the call from the doctor. And I thought, well, this is a heck of a Christmas present here, that I had not only prostate cancer, but a pretty significant, aggressive form of it. Prostate cancer can be one of those things that's a long, stretched out situation. In my case, it was aggressive and it was life threatening, and it's something had to be done about it. But I was kind of depressed about it and this kind of thing. And then it was right around Christmas time, and I had my two granddaughters at that time were 5 and 2, and we had a kind of a planned day out with the grandkids for Christmas time, get together with the grandparents, and we did the arcade and bowling and all that kind of good stuff you do. And we ended up at a McDonald's to get a Happy Meals, is what you do with your 4 and with your 5 and 2-year-old grandkids, and
Of course.
So we were having Happy Meals and all that kind of stuff. And they, of course, are young enough. They had no idea what was going on with me, and I didn't really want them to know. But the synopsis of the story is they're giggling and laughing and having their Happy Meals and singing Christmas songs and what have you. And then I looked at them and I said, okay, I've been in a funk about this. I got to do something about this. I had two parts of my thinking was, I want to see these little girls who are now, 5 and 2. I want to see them grow up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see them as young women of whatever, 21 and 18, and doing whatever they're going to do, college or marriage or whatever they're going to do then, which means I need to be around for another 20 years. So I kind of had that determination. And then I also said, if I'm going to do that, I don't want to be the grumpy old grandpa who's all mad at life. I'm going to change things around. And so I kind of had an aha moment and said, okay, things have got to change, and they're going to change right now. Now, a podcaster, I also had already previously scheduled to go to a big podcasting conference called PodFest.
Oh, yeah.
In Florida. And so I went to the conference, and there was some other folks there who had some health-related podcast, and I ran into my co-host, Deb, who is a breast cancer warrior, she calls it, and she's dealt with stage 4 breast cancer, and I'm dealing with prostate cancer. And she just had a big infectious laugh, and I kind of met her, and we got together. We decided, okay, well, we just decided to kind of set aside, or we decided to emphasize this new project, Cancer and Comedy, which was basically the combination of Walt and Anne Marie of I kind of think, okay, what are my assets? What have I got going on for me here? What do I got working for me? Because what the plans had to be kind of set aside in retirement. Now, what am I going to do? So I basically, okay, here's what I've got working for me. I've got 43 years as a pastor and dealing with people in all kinds of life situations, including cancer.
Sure.
And had that going for me. I also, several years ago, got my doctoral degree in transformational leadership, which means I'd kind of studied the process of change, both individually and in a group dynamic kind of a thing, from the academic standpoint. So I, actually have a doctoral degree in transformational leadership. So as I took those things, I said, well, what else do I like here? Well, I also like, I like comedy stuff. I like the late night comedians. I like to laugh. I've always incorporated humor and laughter in talks that I've given, whether it be sermons or other talks. I'm known as kind of the dad joke guy in our family, and sometimes they're many time moaners and groaners. But I used to send my 3 adult kids a daily dad joke of the day, and that kind of stuff. And so I kind of took these 3 factors here, these 3 resources that I had, which were my experience in ministry, my education in transformational leadership, and an interest that I had in comedy and things like that. And I always thought maybe I might like to try my hand at stand-up comedy someday.
Really?
And
wow.
then, and I've had a chance to do that a couple of times. And then So I said, put those things together. And then I happened to meet Deb is her name, my co-host, and she had some similar interests. And so we decided to put together a podcast that would focus in on what is sometimes called therapeutic humor, which is basically taking an approach to bad things in life and to apply a bit of hope and humor to them.
Yeah.
And let me just unpack that just a little bit for you. And so both she and I are cancer thrivers, warriors. She likes to use the term warrior, and I like that too. But so we deal with cancer on an ongoing basis, life-threatening cancer. But we also knew that cancer can kind of be a metaphor with almost anything that eats you alive. Kind of cancer in and of itself is just a replication of bad cells, really. But that can be emotional stuff, that can be mental health, it can be, bad relationships, financial stuff. So we use kind of metaphor of cancer. And the comedy is not only the, ha-ha belly laugh comedy, which is good, and we do that, but it is also kind of that side of life that the Bible says a cheerful heart is good medicine. And we, have heard the term, that laughter is the best medicine. Well, it turns out that a lot of that is true. And a lot of that is scientifically and medically factual. And so we decided to apply all those things. And so we get together on a weekly basis. We have a little chat among ourselves about some topic at hand, or we often talk to people who have had their own stories of overcoming some bad thing. In most cases, it's something physical health wise, was some positive thing. Now, it's not all. We've had actual comedians on our show, and it's been great. And we've also had people who are, people, everyday folks in business and life, and teachers, and people who are folks who have been students, and other folks in any walk of life who've used some form of kind of humor therapy, in the sense of choosing to see the brighter side of life in order to apply it to the bad thing that's happening to them. And we just call it, we like to say we deal with cancer and comedy podcast is all about helping cancer impacted people to cope with hope, to cope with cancer with hope and humor. And we kind of break that down even smaller to live life, to turn the grim into a grin, the grin being cancer and the great grin being just a vitality in life. So our target audience is those people who've had some bad thing happen to them, but have said, I'm not giving up on life. I'm not giving up on myself. I'm not just checking out and putting my head under the covers. I'm getting after it. So whether I have one day left or, years and years left, I'm going to live my life to the fullest and have some fun doing it, and not be a grumpy old man, who kind of yells at the kids, the Make-A-Wish kids, to get off my lawn. We don't want to do that. We just want to have some fun in life too. So I've talked a lot there, but
that's good though. Yeah, no, you gave us a good lay of the land, and that's first of all useful, and second of all, I mean, you're totally talking to the right audience. We are on board with the whole idea that if you can shift your vibration, shift your mindset to a happier place, good things are going to happen.
Yeah.
They just do.
They do. Indeed, they do. And so I've just asked you, Walt, give me an example in your life of some good thing that has happened in your life because you got a shift of mind or shift of attitude that took place.
Well, that's an easy one. I mean, you talk about starting your podcast. That's what happened here. I started this podcast because I was in the depths of despair. Okay. And I did that because my business got wiped out along with a whole bunch of other businesses in the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, okay.
By 2012, I'm in really hurting shape. My ex and I we're deep in debt. The business is not doing well. I can't seem to revive it. It doesn't, no matter what I do, everything seems to get worse rather than getting better. I have no idea what's going on. My spiritual background was unlike you. I kind of went the other direction. I had a major resistance to organized religion, particularly Christianity, because of some experiences I'd had that were on the negative side there. And so I did not have that to go to. But I discovered this whole law of attraction thing, which has certainly some parallels. And I was a little skeptical, but I was also interested, and I didn't really understand it. I'd seen The Secret, like, okay, maybe, kind of, sort of, but I'm not sure I really buy into it. but I need to do something now. And the way I often like to say it is, I couldn't afford to hire a coach. I couldn't afford a self-help book, but I could afford to start a podcast. I knew how to do that. It didn't cost me anything.
There you go. I kind of a similar thing. And
right.
Anne-Marie, I'd be similar in your story as well. What are you doing here, and what's changed for you?
Well, I was originally a listener.
Okay.
So I was a listener, and then Walt wanted some co-stars. So I kind of put myself forward to be a temporary one. And 4 years now, I think. But loving it. But I think for me, I mean, a bad thing was it's a health thing in a way. It was menopause for me. Menopause just took me way down.
Okay.
But so that's when I started to do a lot of practice on myself and did like mindset practice and got spiritual, and then to law of attraction and learning more about that and religion and just like the whole thing together. So yeah, that kind of changed my life and my view, and it got me through it. Got me through a very rocky time.
That is awesome. Well, I've found, Walt and Anne-Marie, that almost everybody has some sort of story like that, don't they? Where they've met some adversity or some bad thing in life, and they need handles on how to get through it, because so many people get stuck. They get stuck. Not everybody comes out of the tailspin of their business crashing or marriage messing up or health crisis. I've seen it myself, where I've seen people give up on life, physical life or spiritually, or give up on a marriage or any number of things like that. And
it's interesting too how easy it is to make that decision, because so many people, I'm sure you've had this with guests on your show, maybe your own experience as well, but so many people that I've talked to, they were at a crisis point, and it was literally a decision of, do I make a change or not? And I'm not sure I'm ready to do it, but I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be as extreme and as serious as even suicide. I have
absolutely.
I've had many people with serious situations where they've had health and other. One of the comedians I brought on, we've had, of the 80 or so episodes we've had, probably 50 of them we've had a guest, and we've had several comedians and other entertainers on. But what I'm point is, one of the comedians, actually, his story was that he had attempted suicide on a couple of times and came back, and part of his comeback was to really get involved with comedy. He became a stand-up comedian, and as part of his comeback. But the point is, everybody's got a story, but not everybody has the tools in order to navigate through it. And so that's what we try to do on Cancer and Comedy: develop a community of people, and then we try to offer some tools and some teaching to help people to navigate the bad stuff and to come out to a better place as well. So that's what we're all about.
Which is fabulous, and it's exactly what podcasts are strongest at doing, in my opinion, anyway. I find that people listen to podcasts precisely because they're trying to answer some question, or they're trying to gain a skill, they're trying to acquire a tool, they're dealing with some sort of situation. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of the fact, just like you said, we all go through stuff. If I can just find somebody else who's been through something similar to what I've gone through, they may have some secrets that I haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, and they may be just a step or two ahead of where we're at, but still a step or two ahead. Or they just maybe right there as a fellow traveler. We call it going through the wilderness experience, that everybody has this. And in fact, the process that I teach, I call it the insane period of time. when your first bad thing happens to you, or forget the news, you get the cancer diagnosis, you get that bankruptcy notice, your spouse says, I'm leaving you, you have a mental breakdown, a number of things. You kind of go through the insane period where you are in chaos. You are a mess and disoriented and that type of thing. And sometimes you just got somebody just to be with you during that time. That can be helpful. So that's part of what we do. We want to be a fellow traveler, to be in that person's ear, in their earbud, or maybe on their screen. And we also are one of the things we have been doing this for a year and a half now. We're leaning in this year to maybe doing some workshops and courses and some retreat settings and things of this nature. We'll see where that leads us, but that's kind of on the horizon for the cancerandcomedy.com podcast.
Yeah, very good. I like that. Have you also noticed that when that crisis moment hits, we often call it a crash and burn moment.
Yes.
When that crash and burn moment hits, it's usually accompanied by not just chaos in how you're feeling and dealing with that situation, but everything else turns into chaos as well.
Oh yeah. You suddenly, I'll just use my own example from going through some bad things in my life. You suddenly whatever, you lose your keys all the time.
Yeah.
You don't eat right. Your exercise and things like that goes to pot. You start to be meaner to your spouse and kids or whatever. You kick the dog, any number of things that you end up doing. I call that kind of the insolence part of this. It's when you have,
Yeah, good word.
I have the way I teach this, I teach about the I problem, as in the letter I, and two of those, one of those is the insane part I mentioned there. And then another part of is the insolence, where you kind of get a little mean, a little surly, because what are those things pointing towards? They're I words, but
Absolutely.
they're to me. They're very selfish type of things as well, and we got to turn that around and be more outwardly focused.
And that's the challenge, especially when you're in the midst of crisis and chaos, because the last thing you want to have to do is to work on making yourself better. You're just feeling miserable at that point.
Well, you can get this downward spiral, and so many people get there, and it's hard to pull out of that. That's depression. That can turn into clinical depression, and I've seen my share of that, and I've dealt with depressed moments. But if you stay stuck in depression, that can become clinical depression. You need to deal with it even more intensely. But what we are trying to do here in Cancer and Comedy, and I see what you're doing here in LOA, is just offer just a little different perspective, a little, let's see things from in a new light. Have it, I love your process here, a daily dose. A daily dose. One of the things you can do is just give yourself a daily joke. I have a deck of joke cards I carry with me that are right. I show one here that are right behind me, and I give myself at least one dad or types joke a day just for my own deal, and then I often will give those. I take these cards with me, and sometimes I give them away. Just see somebody at a restaurant or whatever, give them a little joke, just a little slice of humor to lighten the load.
I've often thought, I deliberately chose the phrase "your daily dose of happy" because it has like a nice marketing feel to it.
Absolutely.
But I could just as easily have said your hourly dose of happy or your minute by minute dose, because actually that's probably truer in terms of what you really want to aim for, rather than just once a day. Not that once a day is bad. It's great. I'm glad that people would do that much, but it's so much more effective if you can find a way to do it every hour or every couple hours or every few minutes. Whenever you can think to do it during the day. That's when I find I get the best results anyway.
One of the people I interviewed on our Cancer and Comedy podcast was a woman who at one time was a professional clown and a street performer in Europe and other places. Anyhow, the point is, part of what she does now is she travels the United States in an old Jeep, and she basically goes to Walmarts around the country and other places like Walmart, and she goes in and she finds some worker there and she gives them a hug and just tells them, "You're awesome." And she does these little workshops and what have you about mindfulness and things like that. But she makes a purpose to go into places where she senses there's a little bit of just whatever, despair, things like that, and gives them a little something good.
Yeah, I like that. Wow, that's a really cool vocation to have chosen for oneself.
Yeah, she's quite an amazing person. She's in the organization that I'm a part of now, called the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor, which kind of studies all this kind of thing, and both from kind of a scientific basis and an application basis. And they do workshops, and I'm pleased that I'll be speaking at their international conference in a few weeks here. And so that's part of where this whole process here has kind of led me, Anne Marie and Walt, to some opportunities. I've been able to speak at some podcasting events. I've been able to host a comedy show in my local community, which was a fundraiser for cancer. And we had a professional comedian come in who was also a cancer survivor in his own right. And he did a great show. We raised a fair amount of money for cancer research. So we did something good there. And then I've been able to speak at some national events in podcasting and in therapeutic humor. And I'm writing a book on it right now, and some things of that nature. And so we'll see where life takes you. You never know when you kind of extend yourself out there. Because a few years, 3 years ago, when I was getting ready to retire, I was just going to hang it up. I had no thoughts about writing a book about this topic. I was thinking about writing other books and things like that, but about this topic, I didn't think so. But here I am doing this thing called therapeutic humor, which I knew that humor is therapeutic. I didn't even know there's organizations around this and deep scientific study about it and things of that nature, which here we go.
You mentioned earlier how people find themselves in a place where they've been faced with the task of how am I going to deal with the situation, and we often call them the crash and burn situations. Mm-hmm. And you raised a really important point that I wanted to go back to, kind of circle back around to. You talked about having somebody to reach out to. I'll say in my own case, I'm 2 years divorced, and my ex and I went through all kinds of stuff together. We actually had a really good relationship for a lot of years. The communication kind of fell apart the last couple of years, but for the most part, it was a good marriage. So the breakup was particularly tough for that reason, particularly challenging and difficult. And I was so grateful to have, first of all, I'd been doing the podcast at that point. It was actually around the same time that you got your diagnosis. It's about the same time I had the breakup. And the experience of doing the podcast for all those years, it was 10 years at that point, had given me so many tools to work with that I knew I had to make change. I knew how devastating it would be to stay in that space. And then even more importantly, I had contacts like Anne-Marie, good friends who I've done the show with for years, other co-hosts and so forth. And I reached out and I said, help me. And they did. And it was wonderful. I mean, that probably did more than anything else. That combination of the tools I acquired and the deep friendships I've acquired as well. That combination got me off of that stuck place faster than anything I can think of that could possibly have happened. I mean, it's not like I didn't have to deal with stuff for the next year or two. I did. And even now, occasionally something still, pops up to make me feel sad for a moment. But oh my goodness, it was so much easier because of what happened those first 2 weeks. Yeah. Those first 2 weeks, my friends got me through it. And if you don't have something like that, I feel sorry for somebody who doesn't have something like that, because I can see how something that you encounter can just carry on for years.
Yeah, you had some tools in your toolbox to work with there, and Anne-Marie was a part of that. And I'm sure you had other people that you developed in a network or of collaboration or in some other way. And so I call that I've worked out a process to help people do this. And I call what you described there I call it the ACTS plan, ACTS or ACTS ACTS pack. And the A in that is to take action. So you had to do something. Okay. Yeah. That's the physical part of it. And the C in the word ACTS stands for connecting. And the connecting can be with, it could be kind of two levels. It could be with other people in your network. It could also be with a higher power, but that becomes kind of the source of your power. And so that's what I work on. And you got to identify the problem first. You got to kind of come to terms with it, deal with the stark reality of whatever it is, then apply the ACTS plan or the ACTS pact.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. That's what I think the beauty of podcasts are, because sometimes you can be sitting in those emotions and you can feel like you're the only person in the world going through it. And then when you come across a podcast and you people who've got through it and given you tips, or people who are going through it, you feel less alone and you feel more like able to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like that's been a part of your story too. Sounds like Anne-Marie, people like Walt and others have helped you to navigate whatever you're going through, right?
Yeah, I remember I wrote in before I joined the team, but they had a whole show based on a letter I wrote in, just saying, what would you do? Can you give me some advice around this? And they did, and it was wonderful. And half of it was like, yeah, I'm on the right lines, and the other half was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Thank you, and just giving me the elevated thought process over it. So yeah, absolutely. And I love going and looking for knowledge if there's something I'm not sure on, confused on, need help with, I'll definitely go and find it.
Yeah. Well, we've been pleased in our podcast that people reach out to us. One woman reached out and she wrote us a rather lengthy synopsis and said she downloaded all of our episodes and knew a lot of the people we are described the people we'd interviewed, and she even called me out that I'd repeated a joke a couple. A part of my show was I have a dumb joke, okay, and I'd repeated the joke a couple times. So she called me out on that. So that's good for her. But my point is, you develop people who have a relationship, kind of even bold enough to call you out, and then that's okay. That's good. So yeah.
If you're going to be called out for something, it might as well be a dad joke. I mean,
that's right. That's right. But I've been careful ever since then. I, record the jokes I do, things like that. So.
That thing about dad jokes is you hear them over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I've got, but basically my wife and my kids know that I've got a certain reel going on that they hear, and they are very tired of them after 30, 40 years. But yeah, I gotta be careful now on what I put out into the public here. But yeah, but you know what? I love to have fun. Don't you guys love to have fun? Wouldn't it have more fun to go through life with a bit of a smile and a bit of a laugh and taking a little bit of a risk in that rather than just sitting back and just being a sourpuss and being like, oh, poor me, and whiny and things like that. I can't stand whiny people, especially when it's me, And,
yeah. Well, that's honest. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
But
not many people can be that honest.
If I'm in a bad mood, I'll go and watch a fun show where I'm going to have a giggle, and then that does just lifts your mood, doesn't it? Just take some of that off you.
Well, yeah, there's actually a lot of research about how it reduces a good laugh reduces pain. It lifts the rates of your endorphins. Fire up a little bit, and cortisol goes down. That kind of thing happens. There's lots of research about this type of thing, which you folks and many of your audience are probably familiar with. But American Cancer Society and all kinds of research places have data that says that can happen. So some of the things I've studied is it's not only kind of allowing humor to come to you, you kind of notice something, but to be intentional about it. Maybe watching a comedy thing, or pull up something on YouTube, a comedian. I do that pretty regularly. Or just reading I got a bunch of joke books here, and all these books behind me. I got theology books and podcasting books and joke books, and I got all kinds of stuff in this bookshelf behind me. But to be intentional about it is what I'm trying to say. So even if you're not, even if you're in pain with a disease or something like that, do something to lighten the mood.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. I was thinking about a few things that I wanted to touch on here. One of them is you were mentioning comedy that you like to listen to and watch and so forth. And I kept thinking about my favorite comedian, Robin Williams.
Oh, yes.
Anytime that I wanted to get an uplift, there was one particular appearance of his on Inside the Actors Studio. I have the DVD of it. And if I need a real big lift, I'll just put that on, because those first 8 minutes, he is totally Robin in every Robin-ish way. And in a clean way too. He doesn't do any of the blue stuff, which is even better.
Right.
And I mean, he was like incredible.
And I have seen that, and he is one of the interesting characters who I've studied, because comedians often are people who have had comedians and entertainers are often people who have had extreme highs and extreme lows in their life. And Robin Williams is definitely one of those. In fact, I forget, in the neighborhood of 20 years ago, he and Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal had a event basically for
series of events,
a series of events called Comedians Against Cancer or something like that. A bunch of fundraising, and that's one of the reasons got me kind of interested in this whole area here. But he was involved with it. He had a movie called Patch Adams out some time ago. It was basic about this kind of thing too, about a doctor who used therapeutic humor. And so those things I point to, but we also know that because of his, mental anguish, he took his own life. And so those are some things that we know about this here deal. So I would like to be a part of a solution for those people, including people in the entertainment world or others who have these intense highs and lows, to say, okay, you can deal with this. but deal with this in a way that gets you through it rather than crashing and burning and, to your demise. So the high is one that you can live with, but not be so high that you, when the crash comes, it's just going to destroy you. Rob Williams is one of my favorites that way. There's lots of others that way too.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads to one of the other thoughts I wanted to bring in, because you have the background as a pastor.
Yes.
And while my spiritual beliefs might be different from yours, my path is certainly different. I've still ended up in a spiritual place. And I think the one thing that we could certainly find agreement on is that when you find humor, when you find a way to not take your situation so seriously and find a way to lighten up and so forth, your spiritual path increases.
Oh,
yeah, you're able to your ability to connect to that higher power.
Yeah,
it gets exponentially better.
Absolutely. Amory, you were going to say something, I think. Let's see.
No, I was just listening.
What I want to say about that, I've had enough and will not tolerate, just personally, don't care to tolerate toxic anything, including toxic religion or toxic politics or toxic anything for that matter. I don't have time. I don't have time for it anymore. And there's too much of that out there. Just from coming from a church religious background, I know that a lot of people have been hurt by calling out things from the Bible or other holy books, Quran and others, and then applying them to be hurtful. Whereas if you really study the Bible and other things like that, there's a lot of situations that are about being positive and being helpful. The key verse that I'm not going to take off on a preacher tangent here. I'll just give you this one key verse of scripture that we base a lot of what we do on. It's Proverbs 17:22, and it just simply says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. A lot of people in that crushed spirit part of things, but the antidote to that, or the relief of that, is a cheerful heart. That's what the Bible says, and there's similar things in the Quran and other books about having this approach to life. And that's let's go there. Let's go there. Let's not be and go to the toxic places that so many people go and utilize that. And why do they use it? To manipulate and hurt others because they don't feel good about themselves. I would rather people feel good about themselves and be in a collaborative way, a community way. That's what I'm about. Community. The best times in life is when you're sharing life together, whether it's around a meal or around going to a ball game or going to some event, a concert, a comedy show. What is there anything better? And let me ask you this. There's not much better than I've experienced in my life when you're with a group of people. That could be just two people, or it could be thousands of people, when you're all laughing together, hearty laughing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. When that kind of the rolls of laughter come, when you're telling some silly story about something that happened in your family, it could be that kind of thing. We got a silly story in our family about how one time I accidentally I was trying to throw a hamburger out the car window when we were driving, and because I didn't want the pickles on it, and I ended up hitting my wife at the side of the head, and the hamburger patty stuck on her ear. Oh dear! And so my kids, it's just a silly, dumb thing that happened, but my kids still tell that story now about what happened many years ago. So you can have big fun about that, or you can be at a comedy show with Rob Williams. You mentioned there about how his actors theater show made you laugh and think as well. Nothing better than a good laugh in a group, in a community.
I totally agree, and it's even better in a community, but it works just as well when you're alone.
Absolutely, it works. It works both ways.
It's very effective, no matter how you're doing it. Yeah,
and I think when you see stuff like that as well, you also just want to share it. Because I know, like, if I'm like scrolling on like YouTube or something, and if something really funny comes on, my kids will love that, and I'll forward it on to them. You just want to share that lovely feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can happen in other ways too. Some people singing, that's another way of doing it. Or some people just kind of enthralled by some event that happens, like a big cheer at somebody scores the, winning basket in a basketball game, last second shot or whatever, big cheer goes up. You get the idea. But when you do something in community, and you can be encouraging one another. And also that crosses a lot of those boundaries that we talked about earlier, whether it be religious toxicity or political stuff or a class kind of a thing, or financial thing, or racial things. These things can cut through those things and be places of entry into deeper, more engaged relationships. I think that. What do you two think?
Totally agree. I'll tell you something else. The way that you kind of inadvertently tied together laughter and singing in the same sentence made me recall something about dads.
Go for it.
My father, of course, this is long ago, about long before the age of the internet. My father was a song leader. He literally would go. He was very much involved in his church and the council of churches, and he would go from one event to the other, and he would be called up on stage to lead everybody in song. Now this is back before the days of rock and roll, back before all of that. So it was basically leading people in songs like "I've Been Working on the Railroad" and stuff like that, that kind of thing. And he was so good at it, in part because he was very gregarious. He was very outgoing kind of a man. And so he could connect easily with people in the audience. And one of my favorite stories, you talk about stories, right? You were mentioning stories that, your kids are sick of because they've heard them for 40 years. Well, this is one of the stories I heard for 30, 40 years. It was how my dad was invited to lead singing at a large gathering in Albany, New York, at an armory, where there were some, he never was giving me exact numbers, but I got the sense there were like 2,000 or 3,000 people in this armory. Now, this was, they didn't have a good PA system. This is like the late 1940s. So there was no great PA system. And the thing was just a raucous noise of people all having chitter chat conversations all over the place, to the point where the leaders of the conference couldn't even get everybody's attention to get the thing started. So they said, well, my dad's name was also Walt, says, well, do something about this. And so he gets up on stage and he looks around and nobody's paying any attention to him. Yeah. And so he sees two guys sitting in the chairs in the front row. He says, can you hear me? And they said, yeah, we hear you. I said, do you know I've been working on the railroad? Yeah, we know that. Sing it with me. So he starts getting them to sing, and then their neighbors start to sing, and then their neighbors around them start to sing. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes, the entire audience was engaged in singing, to the point where he was able to use his finger to direct, okay, you sing now, and you sing now. And I mean, he was doing all this kind of stuff to get everybody engaged through singing. And when they were all done, he got a big round of applause, and everybody's so excited, especially the leaders, because they could now talk to everybody because everybody was listening.
And the magic here is, Walt and Anne-Marie, the magic here is that you recall that story with a smile on your face. Now, you may not even been there, but you've heard the story passed on
before I was born
in your family, and that story's been passed on. And then we all can have stories, or maybe we even heard it, a video or a speech of something that was done 100 years ago, whatever, but it can be memorable. And humor can do that. It can help us remember things. I've been at that conference. Not too many people remember whatever the talk was by whoever gave the talk. They remember that I've been working on the railroad, singing and that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would have told it to their families, and it would have rippled everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's also the other thing that's cool about laughter and humor. It has a ripple effect.
Sure.
Or in this case, singing, but singing also I think singing is actually an expression of humor. I mean, maybe that's a little bit controversial.
No. I don't think it's controversial. I think it's joy. In most cases, it's what's expressing emotion. Of course, singing can express, sad emotions too, but oftentimes it's expressing joy or something felt deeply within you. And, there's even things, I can't pull up the chapter and verse right now, but there's things about how the way the air rushes from your lungs through your body when you laugh or when you sing or when you cry are all kind of similar, and they all are basically a purge of something that's bad in you.
Yes.
People say, I need a good cry, or I need a good laugh, or I just felt like singing. Those are expressions of emotions that we need to have there. Yeah. Awesome.
Totally agree. I love it. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we obviously have a lot of parallels that have gone on in terms of our lives, in terms of our podcasts and so forth. And I'm finding that to be really cool. One thing that I am curious about, though, you mentioned your co-host and how your co-host and you have the similarity of the cancer experience and so forth. What do you take away as, whenever I think of the shows that I've done with Anne-Marie and Joel and Jody Lynn and others who've been my co-hosts, I think about certain moments, key moments I had with each one of them, where it just kind of stuck in my mind, like, wow, that was a really big deal. Like Anne Marie telling the story about the letter that she sent in that we talked about, and she ends up being a co-host later on. I'm curious, can you think of anything like that with you and Deb?
Yeah. Yeah, Deb is an amazing person. She has a great website and Facebook page called trying not to die.live, and that's both a website. Trying not to die.live with both her website and her Facebook page of the same name, trying not to die.live. And one of the things that struck me about her when I initially met her, she does big, boisterous laugh and a real joy about her. But she has gone through, I think, 4 bouts of stage 4 cancer and with surgery and treatments, and been doing that for 10 years. And she just has an incredible attitude about it. But one of the things I picked up on in one of our early conversations is that she told me that she gives a name to her ailments, and I forget what they were, but it was like, she called one of her cancer surgeries, Jaime Horowitz or whatever, and I got to get rid of Jaime or whatever it was. And, I got to get rid of this bad thing that's within me. And so she kind of personalized it in a way. So she's a great storyteller about her own story, but she does it. It's not, and believe me, I've been around plenty of people who just go drone on and on and on about their ailments. But I'm not a big fan of that. Somebody, my toe hurts or whatever it is. But, she gives the story of what's going on with her. But in terms of victory, achieving this, I'm going to beat this thing, and you can too. Whatever's going on with her, that attitude, I love about her. And so that's why we've been together for 1.5 years now. And we got some great plans moving forward. And maybe next time we can have her on with you. Maybe you can have her on your podcast. She would be a great asset to your podcast.
Yeah.
Well, Amber, I wonder if you'd let me just share a little bit of my process that I teach for a little bit. Would you mind if
that was going to be my question. Can you tell us a bit about your toolbox?
Yeah. If you don't mind, this is kind of the book I'm writing and the talk I'm giving in a couple months. And I just think it might be helpful to the LOA listeners who are dealing with things. And I mentioned I had prostate cancer. So every cancer and every type of ailment has its things to deal with. And I'm going to use kind of the framework of prostate cancer, some of the things that happen with that, in terms of what we deal with. And then I'm going to give you a quick response to that. I call it the 4 eyes of what you deal with. That's the eye, looking at myself. And I mentioned a couple of them already. The insanity part where you kind of go crazy. And then there is also the insolence where you kind of get mad about it and you're not a very nice person. And so that's one part of it. That's 2 of the eyes. But 2 of the other eyes of this situation have to be a little more specific about kind of the side effects of prostate cancer that are also with other people as well. And one of them I just call incontinence, which is part of what happens to you when you have prostate cancer. You lose control. You lose control of your bodily functions, and it's no fun. And so there's that lack of control. And for anybody, if you lose control, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good. And so nobody really likes that. And when people get sick or have bad things happen in their life, they often feel like they're losing control. So I just use the metaphor of the side effect that I had and people have of incontinence. So, but it also becomes focused on me. It's a me thing. It's what's happening to me. And so that's 3 of the 4 eyes. So you got the insanity, and you got the insolence, and then the incontinence. And the other one is kind of the big one, which is impotence. Which when they remove your prostate, you're impotent, and you have to do other extreme measures to be sexually active or anything like that. And that really has an impact on your sense of power, a sense of your. This is for the case of prostate cancer. It's a masculine thing, and you got all kinds of dynamics with that. But it can be with anybody. Sure. But if you're impotent, you lose your power. And so you lose your power to make decisions about your health and other things like that. And all 4 of those eyes are kind of pointing back at me. I call them the I factor and the I problem, that kind of thing. But what do you do about them is what I like to teach about in terms of, I call it the Acts Pact. And it kind of speaks to all those things. And we've mentioned a couple of them already. And because I believe that once you kind of identify the issue, the cancer, whatever it is, and you choose you're going to deal with it, that's your pivotal moment. In my case, he was with my granddaughters at that McDonald's, and I didn't want them to grow up in a grumpy old grandpa, if at all. And but the A in the word acts, ACTS, is to take action, which is we've already mentioned it, but that's basically physically doing something, getting off your rear end and doing something, getting active, physically active, anything along that line, or to have something new activity you do. In my case, it was going to a podcasting conference and deciding to start a new podcast. That was the action that I took. And then the C in the word acts is to connect, and we've already mentioned this one too, connect with a higher power and or other people. And that's what you've done in LOA podcast. That's what I do with Cancer and Comedy. Develop that community of other people, or a spiritual aspect, and there's a kind of a spiritual aspect when you get with other people. And I know you're in a law of attraction, and that has to do a lot with how we seek energy from kind of out. You see beyond yourself, when you have, so that's the C, is to connect. And the T in the word acts is to think strategically. That's the cognitive piece. That's using your brain. Okay, what are the processes I need to do? What are the habits I need to do? What are the processes I need to do, whether it's medically or physically or mentally or maritally or anything else? What do I need to do, and then get about doing it? That's a planning stage. That's the that's where you kind of take control of that which has been out of control in your life. And the S in the word acts is to serve others with love. So you got to think, what is your greater purpose? And is the purpose no longer about me, about the I factor, but it's about serving others with love. And so the way I see it, and Deb sees it, and the way you see it, I believe, is to serve others with love in terms of, what we like to say the purpose is, to offer hope and humor to people who have dealing with some desperation in your life. So that gives you purpose in your life. And so then the pact part of it is, so you got ACTS is kind of the response to the 4 I's, if you see that. And then the pact, PACT, is the promise that you make to follow through with it. And and that's the covenant. That's the thing that you do. And what I did, and what I did myself, and what I teach our students to do, is to write a credo, or write a pact that you make with yourself, that you're going to follow through with these things. And so that's what I do. And if you'll allow me to, I'd like to read the pact that I wrote for myself, and it's part of what I teach to others. And I think it might be helpful to your audience in what we're about. It's based a lot of.
It's always helpful to have an example. I mean, people come up with really cool tools, but when you have an example to apply it, it makes it so much more real. So I love the idea.
Yeah, and so it's just very simple. And I just so what I teach people to do, to write something down and then post it someplace where you see it. I have a bulletin board in my home office area. I see this every day, and I read it about every day. It says, my personal credo for Brad Miller: I will not let cancer define me. I will leverage cancer to refine my life to the better in my relationships, and to drive me forward in my remaining days to fulfill the mission of sharing a message of healing through hope and humor, and teaching the biblical message that a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. So I read that about every day, and I teach people how to create one of those for themselves and be a touch point for others. And so I just thank you for allowing me to share that, because that's
that's very important. Yeah. The thing that jumps out at me about it is that by having that statement to read every day, because you describe how you have it out in the open where you can spot it every single day, and you take the time.
I have a bulletin board right here.
Yeah, and you can easily skip that if you want to. You could brush by it every day, but I can tell from the way you're saying it, you don't do that. You take the time to actually study it, to read it out loud, to remind yourself of it, to basically, the way we describe it is, get into the vibration of it.
There you go. Yes. Yeah, and I'm familiar with all attraction thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's a really, really big piece of leveraging a tool.
I think
it's one thing to have the tool; it's another thing to actually use it.
Yeah, it's about having a process. This is part of my my doctorate degree of transformational leadership. Is you got to have a process, and you got to apply the process. You got to be intentional about it, and so that's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous.
I love the fact that, we work for companies and they all have mission statements and we all buy into that. But having our own mission statement like that and buying into that ourselves, for our own lives, that's just wonderful.
Well, it's got to be more like a company mission statement. Sometimes they're just posted on the wall and people just blow by them. but this is where this is about your life, and you need to not just blow by it. You got to apply it and live it out, or it's not going to do any good. So that's what I try to teach people to do.
And I'm guessing it's fairly easy guess, to be perfectly honest, but I'm guessing that the way that you write that out, what you decide to say, how you decide to string the words together, it has to be done in a way that has such deep meaning that you're not going to want to blow by it every day. You're going to want to connect to it every single day, because that's part of the process.
Well, the process I teach, there's a little exercise that goes with that ACTS, the A and the C and the T and the S. I have a little portion of that. I teach people how to kind of workshop that in order to write their PAC statement or their covenant statement.
Yeah. And if you have a process that is leading you to that true inner experience, then it's going to be meaningful enough that you're going to want to revisit it every single day. That's what makes these things really work. That's what makes
that's right. It's all about life change. What drives me, what lights me up is see life change in myself, in my spouse, in my 3 adult children, my 2 grandchildren, the people that I encounter with here at Cancer and Comedy, and people I meet like you folks at LOA. And what a great joy it is to be with you, Anne Marie and Walt, about this. When I see life change happen, that's what drives me, and I want to be a part of that and hear those stories and to be a part of that process, because nothing is better when you change from a life that is messed up in a ditch somewhere, with adversity, whatever it is. There's nothing better than having a life that's filled with hope.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. There's one other theme that pops up a lot, and I'll add it in for good measure here, and that is that so many people have come onto the show, including co-hosts, but also many guests like yourself, who have been through all kinds of often horrible stuff. And they come out the other side, and it's amazing to me how often they very consistently express the same sentiment. They'll say it in different ways, with different emphasis, but it's basically the same sentiment. I never want to go through that again, but I'm glad I went through it because I've learned so much from it.
Yeah.
And it's true for me too. I mean, it's amazing how universal that sentiment is. Right.
It's the wilderness experience, going through the wilderness. You start off the journey, the exodus, if you will, out of bondage, to use a biblical metaphor, and then you go through the wilderness for whatever period of time, and you come out to the promised land. I like to call it the promised life. That you promise a life that's full of good stuff, but you got to claim it there. But you got to get through the wilderness first.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us another way through the wilderness. It's been really good. I like that.
What a joy to be with you, Walt and Anne Marie. I love what you're doing here. Hey, just a regular dose, a daily dose of happy.
Well, actually, we're not quite done. We have 2 or 3 things we have to do yet.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Can I get in place there? Before we do that, Walt, we've not had a dad joke.
Oh, you want a dad joke?
I want a dad joke.
Well, I used to do the hokey pokey, but I turned myself around.
Ah, there you go.
Right. Because that's what it's all about.
High five.
Yeah, here. Well, here's one more. Why do octopi always win in a fight? Because they are well armed.
Of course they are. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Some are better than others, of course. So yeah.
Wonderful stuff. Well, first things first, we want to remind people about the name of your podcast and remind them how to find the podcast and how to reach out to you. How do people reach you?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. Really appreciate it. Hey, it's really simple. The name of our podcast, and we are both on audio on our podcast website, which is cancerandcomedy.com. But we're also on Apple Podcasts, and we have a YouTube channel, and you can get all of that by going to cancerandcomedy.com. Follow if you want to follow any of those ways to connect up to, subscribe to any of those. If you would like for me to reach out to you, and I reach out to everybody who contacts us personally and give you a free gift. The free gift is a mini audio course of this ACTS pack that is laid out. It's a 5-lesson set of about 8 minutes each of 5 audio lessons about how to do what we just shared here. And you just simply go to cancercomedy.com/contact, and just leave us your information and we'll get that out to you. And we'd love to hear your stories. And I'm always looking for people to share some story where they've overcome cancer or some other bad adversity, and with some hope and humor. And love to hear those stories and people be part of the Cancer and Comedy community. So that's cancerandcomedy.com/contact. And I personally, either myself or my co-host Deb, will be reaching out to you personally.
Love it. Love it. And we will include that in the show notes too, to make it easy for people to find. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Second thing we like to do is I like to turn to my co-host, who always has a wonderful take on these conversations, and ask her to tie the whole thing together with a ribbon on top. So Anne-Marie, you've been thinking about this one. I've been watching you. You've been thinking about this one. How do you tie this one together?
Do you know, it was just such a wonderful show, and just seeing like something like that, something so life-changing happen, and just the joy you've turned that around to. I think that's just made my heart sing today. So I certainly have got my daily dose of happy. But I think for me, the one thing that stands out is that whole PAX, that whole statement, and actually, you know, taking the action, the whole connection. We all know the importance of connection and the difference that can make. And just kind of thinking, like, okay, so what can I do? What do I want to stand for? And just really connecting with yourself more than anything, and just going in a direction that is going to fulfill you. So I loved that.
So there you go. All right. And then the final thing that we always do with these shows is something I noticed a few years ago. Now that we live in the age of the internet, where everybody's doing, you know, various kinds of self-promotion, and there's all kinds of people starting businesses, and people who are doing things like what you're doing. You know, they got sick, they want to share with other people how to get better, how to fight your way through, and so forth. In the process of doing that, we put out all this really great content. You know, we do the podcast, we write the articles, we do the blog posts on the social media, you know, all this kind of stuff that we're doing. And it's great. But there's so much of it that helps people in ways we don't know about, that we don't get credit for. And I like to kind of try to change that when I can. So Brad, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you don't even know about, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you are making a difference in this world.
Appreciate that. I just right back at you. Send the love right back to you, Walt and Anne-Marie, for doing what you do. Thank you.
We appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.